how many people would it take to maintain operations, right? To do maintenance and things like that. Just have a grasp of the machinery. So I'm a strong believer in do apprentice in the industry that you're going to jump into, for starters. I had an amazing experience in the computer industry, but ultimately, and this is a second thing that I learned, is that
we're your co-hosts, Vicky and Laura, and this is the Resilient Entrepreneurs Podcast, the ultimate guide for ambitious business founders and startups. Hear from business heroes who've faced unexpected challenges as we unpack how they slayed their dragon.
Riggs, welcome to the Resilient Entrepreneurs Podcast. We're really looking forward to this conversation today. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things, business and entrepreneurship and water, which I think will be something very different from what we talked about before. So looking forward to it. We're going to dive right in the deep end. Haha, what I did there? All the puns are coming out. All the bad puns are coming out immediately.
Let's get right into the flow.
Apologies in advance. Let's have it. Okay, we're starting at the beginning. So I'd love to talk about childhood experiences, because I do believe so much of the things we experience in our childhood, how we grew up, affects who we become. So I'd love to learn a little bit about your story. Tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and start the journey for us.
Well, Laura, Vic, it's a great pleasure being here. Thank you for having me. I was son of a migrant worker. He used to launch Procter & Gamble branches in foreign countries. So he'd arrive in a country, and he'd basically get Procter & Gamble going in that country, or if it was going, build it up. So I was born in Toronto, and then we moved very quickly to Puerto Rico, and then Venezuela, and then to Paris. And what's interesting about Paris is that I don't have a memory of not speaking French, which is strange. But I guess so. I was 6 years old, and 5.5, 6 years old. And at that point, you're pretty much, the things flow. And then we went to Brussels, and then back to Paris. And then finally my dad said, "We're going to have to Americanize you." And that was a disaster for me anyway, because, by then I just finished the 7th grade in the French system, and I'd had already 2 years of Latin. And I jumped a grade and went into a public high school in the United States, and that was a shock. Very interesting. And, so I got, unfortunately, I gained a very bad habit, which was that I started skating on what I'd already learned, right? Because the education, even then in 1965, was way behind. And of course, like, I arrived and they had their first year of Latin in the 9th grade. And I already had 2, but now we don't even have any Latin at all. It's like, forget it. So there's been, and I think it's true actually, even in places like France, there's been a tremendous degradation of the education. And Vicky, perhaps in Australia, I don't actually know, but there's been a socialization of education, as they say. And so I was kind of, I think you could say that I'm stateless. I guess you could say sort of, I would say romantically a citizen of the world, but also
otherwise known as gypsy,
or migrant son,
digital nomad.
Yeah,
well, back then it was analog nomad, right? so I was an analog nomad writing letters to my parents on paper.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah, you're used to the moving and the traveling and the new experiences. I can see how that can get a little addicting too. And I also see how that can help your worldview be so different than the average person that kind of stays in place for most of their life. How did that affect you as an entrepreneur when you were ready to step into your own?
Okay, I'm going to tell you the good and the bad. The good is that I was willing to jump in. The bad is I was often jumping in without being ready. For example, in the early 80s, I started a computer company in New York City. And the first computer I sold, I was with the client trying to figure out where the on button was. So
I was going to ask you, Riggs, what's ready really? I mean, we've got to say yes and work out how. Come on, man. And you
Listen,
just
I'm on
explained
board with that.
exactly what ready needs to be.
Thank you, and that's scary true. But in the case of this business, for example, it would have helped me to have done an apprenticeship in the industry. And so I think that's the first thing. As excited as you are about just jumping in, wow, computers are the new thing, woohoo, and the 80s is when small businesses first began to migrate from those safeguard ledgers, they're bear down hard kind of stuff, and with ring, puts it in a ring binder and so forth. And all of a sudden they had gosh, they called them super microcomputers back then. All kinds of interesting stuff.
Hang on, hold that thought. I apologize for the interruption. I just wanted to take 15 seconds of your time to thank you for being a part of this growing community of resilient entrepreneurs. If you could do us just one massive favor and subscribe, you'll be notified of the next great episode of this podcast. And speaking of great episodes, let's get right back to it.
It was an amazing time, but you needed to be in the industry and sort of know, for example, how many people would it take to maintain operations, right? To do maintenance and things like that. Just have a grasp of the machinery. So I'm a strong believer in do apprentice in the industry that you're going to jump into, for starters. Now, I had an amazing experience in the computer industry, but ultimately, and this is the second thing that I learned, is that it often seems like you're going to fail when you're not. And that I was having a terrible time. I was doing what was then a lot of money, $1 million a year as a small business, supporting 12 people in Manhattan on a payroll, ridiculously hard. And what I didn't realize was that when you build a computer or system house, the money's not in the initial implementation, it's the monthly fees. Mm-hmm. And I ended up just disgust giving the business to my best salesman. He's in business to this day. He still has clients that we made in the 80s. So it's 40 plus years of monthly fees, right? And so I went on a journey to learn more about stuff like direct marketing, and even took a break and ski bummed, because that's what people have to do at the age of 40. But the 90s arrived, and that's when I hit the .com.
Okay. You're right on the cusp of all the big ones.
That was my space. Because by then I did know about computers and so forth, and I got involved, and it was great because it was fast, and liquidity events happening. Guess what, Riggs? We sold the company. Your stock is good. I'm like, all right. Then it's not. Okay, that's fine too.
So from .com to .bomb for you?
Well, and back, because what happened was, the 90s was crazy fast. But what happened is the Y2K, year 2000, was a good thing for me because it cleared out all of the mess of the crappy businesses that were being launched, kind of like crypto today, right? And then we were able to do really good work after year 2000, really good work. And that's when I started really getting my stride. So I was really aware that I needed to understand corporate better. And so in 1995, I actually was in the .com, but joined in a corporate sense in what was then one of the corporate players, long gone, of course. And by 2005, I'd worked my way up the ladder, and I was now a COO and president of a company that became a NASDAQ player. And at that point, I made a move, which I probably should regret, but I actually have had fun doing it, which is I told a fund I think I could be a good CEO. So they gave me my first $500,000, and I was a CEO. And that has been almost a 20-year journey, which has taught me so much. But during those 10 years, from 95 to 2005, I created a philosophy called mistake-based marketing. And you're gathering that I made a virtue out of a fault.
I'm loving it already.
I'm loving it already. Tell me more.
Bring it on.
Well, here's what happened. In 2000, all the research budgets went away. Now, back in the day with L. Ron Hubbard, he taught me all about you got to survey. He was a very good manager. Survey, survey, survey. Research. Make sure you know your market and so forth. And I was doing that in the 90s and having big successes with research. I'm a strong believer in opinion research, image research, logo research, all that stuff. Don't just looks like a good logo, we're going with it. It's okay, but you really should do a survey. And I recognized that my problems in the 80s were because I was not recovering fast enough from my mistakes. You see, it's not that I wasn't making mistakes. It's not that you should not make mistakes. You should. You should learn quickly. Okay, got that. And never chase the sunk cost. So, I put so much into it, I got to keep going. No, you know what? You just blew X amount of money. Call it a survey. Move on. Learn from it. And so that really prepared me for the space that I ended up in, which is water, which is about the least disruptive space on the planet, but it also needs the most help. Because water is in trouble all over the place, badly in trouble. People don't realize it, and they go, well, turn on the faucet, water comes out, flush the toilet, water goes away. What's the problem, right? But there are big problems. But the problem is that they're very stuck in their ways. Big water is very much like, this is how we do it. It's big engineering and big companies and lots of municipalities and people who are actually all retiring. And so there's very little desire for change. And so I was stuck for years trying to figure out where was the fulcrum to make the change happen. And eventually it did come about. I found it because the very fact that water is being held down so much by the powers that be it big water, municipalities and so forth, is causing businesses to have to do their own water treatment. They're completely being unserved. And so this phenomenon began of decentralized water that is being done by the people doing the pollution, which why not, right? If you're polluting the water, why not clean it? I mean, municipal water treatment makes sense for a home, but not so much for a factory. Treat your freaking water, dude. So, and one of the things that is driving that is that smart lawyers started suing the polluters even after they'd put their water in the municipality because it wasn't cleaned enough. And so now the polluters have to do their own water treatment because they're being sued anyway, so might as well do it right. So this phenomenon called decentralized water is now booming. It's happening. We've got our own unicorn in the space, all kinds of things like that. And we built a business around that. And that's where we are today.
Wow. Interesting. And I wanted to talk to you about water because I think I come from a very unique place. I don't know if you've ever been to Bermuda, but we collect our rainwater from our roofs. I believe we're the only country in the world that does this. We live in subtropical islands, so we get a good bit of rain. And, when the first settlers came here, there was no freshwater source. There's none. I mean, there's some underground water, but that's in limited supply. So we had to figure it out right away from the first days. And Bermuda was settled the same time as the US. So we go back, the same type of history. And, so collecting water and having our own rainwater and thus preserving it and being very cautious about it, especially in the warmer summer months. And so I've always been brought up to be super, super water conscious. And I realize now, like, it's part privilege and part, of a struggle. And we often just take it for granted. Luckily, I didn't take it for granted because I wasn't allowed to. Shower went past 2 minutes and you were in big trouble, right? It was like, turn off the water when you're putting in the conditioner. We were very conscious of water and very lucky that we are privileged to have such quality water. But I understand that's very different in different areas of the world. And help me understand a little bit more, like, what are some of the other issues? I understand the pollution from the companies, but how does the water system work in the US for anybody who's maybe outside the US and doesn't understand the specific issues inside the country?
Well, our water infrastructure kind of drives the problem in a way because it was built in the early part of the 20th century when everybody thought big concrete, big central systems. Think of the LA River, Greece, where they're driving up and down a dry river. And The idea was get all that fresh water into the ocean fast, get it out of here. And like, wait, it's fresh water, So the mentality back in the early part of the 20th century was very centralized, very dictatorial. And you have in LA, you have this giant water plant called Hyperion. And they process, 1,000,000 gallons a second or something ridiculous. So the centralization, it made a lot of sense to build large central systems. Unfortunately, there are a few very large systems in America, but then there's 150,000 smaller systems. So you have these small rural water systems, they'll serve 10,000 people. And then you have got these giant ones that serve 4 million people, right? So by volume, the top 15% water treatment systems service 85% of the people. So it kind of flips, right? And there's a problem with that, which is that they can never keep up with the environmental regulations, which, by the way, are very sensible, right? So if you go to a site called ewg.org, environmentalworkinggroup.org, ewg.org/tapwater, and in America, put your zip code in there. And you'll be astonished to see that all of the water, chlorine and everything, are within legal requirements, but often thousands of percent above what scientists know today. So the water quality, while compliant, I'm not saying the municipalities are not compliant, is way below what science says. And so the EPA tries to catch up and say, you got to get rid of, microplastics. But then they don't allocate enough money, right? The whole microplastics effort, the forever chemicals effort, which is mandated by the EPA, has a grand total of $5 billion nationwide. It's basically unfunded. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that by just 4 years from now, we'll be running a net deficit of what we should spend of $430 billion a year in America alone, almost $500 billion every year that's not spent. Well, you don't spend $500 billion a year that you're supposed to. Eventually, things start breaking. We have a sewage main break every 2 minutes in America. It's underreported because it happens, down the block. Oh, Joe just had a main break. Oops, But it's nasty and it messes up the groundwater. And here's the other thing, Laura. You're talking about short showers, and that's meaningful in Bermuda, but total residential use or demand for water is only 10% of the total.
Whoa.
So
okay.
90% is business and agricultural. This is all over the world, by the way. The ratio between business and agricultural varies. In Somalia, it's mostly agricultural. In America, it's half and half, business and agricultural. So they are that's where you can get the most bang for your buck if you want to make the water better, is not short showers. Yeah, okay. Short showers, fine, whatever. I learned my trade on a ship, and you're right. You turn off because that water is precious. But I wonder if the large polluters were more than happy to have the population blame itself, I mean, it's kind of like, very bad people. You need to take short showers. Meanwhile, we got rice paddies in Imperial Valley, so which is about as water intensive as you can get. So, how do you get out of this problem? Well, the first thing is that you should recycle the water that you have. Israel does a very good job. Almost 90% of their water is recycled. We recycle less than 1%.
Wow.
And I think Vegas is the best. They get up to about 20%. They're pretty good. Now you can recycle, which, number one, reduces the amount of water you have to buy, so your water rates go down. Number two, it helps with droughts, doesn't it? We've estimated that if you can just get that 1% up to 15%, we will double the amount of fresh water available in America, which is a good goal. But what about the water that's being used in LA that's being sent directly into the ocean? That could be saved. It could be recycled. It could be stored more. And so that mentality is not being fixed by government, because government is basically there to keep things still, hold them still, don't do anything. And that's kind of their function. I'm not saying it's bad. You have to look for initiative from private sector, and that's where decentralized water comes in again. So we built a business around that, and then we got to the next problem, which is people don't have money for these systems, because you built a brewery, and you don't have a budget for $1 million water system. You got a budget to make beer. So what do? Well, you survive the fines. You get fined. You truck the water to another county. You do all kinds of weird things. You don't have the money. So what we put together is a new concept called water on demand, where here comes the MRR. You don't have to pay for your machine. Just pay by the gallon. So you're paying our meter instead of the city's meter. And now we get, and here's the second tweak, regular investors, not institutionals, can invest directly into water on demand. So you get regular, like people who would normally invest in a multi-unit real estate project, right? Well, now they can invest in a water system on exactly the same terms with the LLCs and the bank leverage and this and that, all that stuff. So it's identical to real estate, but it's a water treatment system. $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, whatever it is. So
take it. Yeah.
That's becoming so exciting, because not only do we have the monthly recurring revenue, which creates the cap rate and the cash flow and all that stuff, but we're also making it possible for people like you and me to invest in something interesting at the early stage, which we just don't get access. Yes, I had early access to Bitcoin if I'd ever believed in it. So there we are. We're doing this power to the people thing with water, and structuring it like real estate. And that took a long, long time and a lot of work, but we're there.
Wow. So thank you for all that, Riggs. It's quite the education for both of us, and no doubt for many of our listeners. And I really love how you're an out-of-the-box thinker. So clearly, you've had several strategy conversations with the right people in your team about how are we going to make this affordable? How are we going to solve the price problem? How are we still keeping it accessible? How are we sticking true to our own values around this business? Because this is what's important to us. So, yeah, I mean, that's a lot of strategic conversations. What do you think, out of all that, plus the ones I haven't named, was the most important aspect to getting you to where you are today after this long?
When you're failing, find out what it is that's making you fail, and don't just go. I heard an interesting saying the other day that bankruptcy occurs little by little and then all at once. But it's true. So you're usually in the little by little stage, right? And right there is when you could be fixed. And I have to say, even the all at once can be fixed. I can't tell you how often, we've gotten down to, well, I think we got payroll, and it's like, really? It happens so often. Somebody new comes in the company, go, what? We only have 2.5 weeks of money? I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good, actually.
Such an entrepreneur. We got this. It's fine.
You get inured to the whole problem, right? Because, and here's the important thing, is that most businesses have a terrible problem getting funding. Funding. Capitalization is the big problem. In the 80s, with my computer system, I was actually introduced to a Wall Street dude who said, I'm going to take you public. And I turned him down because I said, oh, sorry, I'm not profitable yet. Ha! How many companies? We've just learned, like, profitability. Who needs profitability? I mean, you need market share, you need penetration, you need to be growing fast, but not necessarily profitability at the bottom line. If the other that's what I didn't understand at the time. I was succeeding. I was doing well. I was getting a lot of customers, and I was a pioneer, and I was building this business that I didn't realize had a long tail, but did. And I said, well, I haven't become net profitable. And that's how an entrepreneur thinks. Mm-hmm. But that's not how you would think. That in the public space, public investors invest in the future. They're investing in the future of a stock. I'm invested in Tesla, and I guarantee you that at $400 some, I'm investing in the future of Tesla, not its present. And Tesla is a case study. They were billions in the red for years, but they were making their metrics. They were building cars, and the cars were getting better, and they were putting in the supercharger network and all these things they were doing. So they're executing on plan. And so the problem is people don't know where to get the funding, and there's a giant gap between seed funding, friends and family, your credit cards, your day job, SBA loan, and then, getting money from a family office or somebody smart, like a small institution or whatever. There's a giant gap. And that gap is filled by regular investors. There's a combination of crowdfunding and accredited investors, and you run them together. Because if you're going to spend money getting investors, you do it through advertising, you do it through social media. If you're going to get investors, then you don't want to waste investors. Even the best targeting in Facebook, you're still ending up with 80% unaccredited investors. And so what are you going to do? Throw them away? So now here's what we've done. OriginClear no longer has water companies. We now spun off all of our water businesses into a new entity called Water On Demand Inc. So if people go to waterondemand.net, they'll see there's that whole, two operating businesses that one handles very large users like power plants, or the other one handles smaller modular type sites. And then the third division is this real estate, water like real estate thing, right? So that's happening right now. We've spun it off. And believe me, that was such a terrible learning experience, because that's a whole other, let's see. No, we don't have time. But anyway, we have a spin-off, and now OriginClear is an accelerator. We take people's businesses and we help them get funding.
Nice.
Now, the problem is that a lot of businesses are not worthy of being funded. You give them money and they will lose it. So we have, association with another group that I work with that does the very early stuff. And then right now, OriginClear, for example, is talking to a company that is a fantastic company. They have Fortune 500 customers. They have amazing technology. They have patents. They're sole source, and they're going out of business.
Whoa.
Because they got themselves in such a cash flow twist. They got so tied up, and they're private. They got so tied up, and you know what? They took a bunch of MCAs, merchant cash advances. The MCA is when you borrow money at 100+%. And you get the money, and then every week the money comes out of the bank account, double what you took. That is very common. It's a very common thing. At one point, even in my company, I had to do it for a while, and Lord, it was painful. This business came along, and it was just right for OriginClear, because it's a functioning business, it's big enough, and we can solve it with funding, and they're not broken, right? They're pure cash problem. That is exciting. And so now we're taking OriginClear and basically using the funding mechanism to get people rapid money. You can raise rapid money even as a private company from these offerings, and then kind of you have to start the outboard, and then go up, and then you get to the point where you're going to become really worthy of institutional funding. So, and that's where we're that transition, right? So, there's a group called Y Combinator in America, and they do a good job, but they primarily feed to VCs. We don't feed to VCs. We feed to institutional private equity and so forth. Slightly different.
And is this, are you one of many in this market, or is this a new-ish idea?
Nobody raises money. Nobody. People don't know how to raise money. And they say, Riggs, can you raise the money? Well, yeah. Okay. Now, do you have $100,000? That's hard. That's hard. Even that's hard, right? So, but you need that much just to get the advertising going, right? You need something. So we'll work with them, but it's better if they have their first $100,000 to throw into that. So it's really exciting because we while doing water, which was so hard and hard to move, we developed this superpower, which was fundraising. And now we've developed a compliant way to raise money because remember, there's all kinds of regulations around raising money. It's fully compliant. And now people can come along and essentially get their funding. And like I say, it's happening right now.
Congratulations. It sounds exciting. I can see the excitement in your face. I can hear the passion in your voice. As much as you're still committed to that original business, it's that, I don't know, there's a light inside of people who are entrepreneurs, who have that spirit, who see a problem and are able to solve it. And yeah, I think that's what I'm seeing in you, Riggs. Is that right? What is it that drives this for you? What motivates you, whether you pivoted or you haven't?
Well, I've pivoted many times. And part of it is that after that 80s experience, I vowed never again to permit myself to fail. Just that's it. It's over. Just don't fail. And
Just make mistakes and call it marketing.
well, but recover, make mistakes and learn. If you make mistakes and don't learn, then you're just an idiot, And I've been an idiot many times. So what we think we've done, look, the water industry needs help big time. It's gigantic. It's kind of like the way the taxi industry was before Uber. Very antiquated. And by the way, to this day, the taxi industry is antiquated. I don't even know why, but they still don't have their act together. Because, my wife and I were in Mexico over Thanksgiving and we got stranded somewhere and I tried calling a cab and it was like this, that. And then I just went to Uber, boop, boop, boop on the app. There was the Uber car. Thank you very much. So you're revolutionizing an industry that badly needs revolutionizing, and that's water. So water is a gigantic challenge for our health. Remember that a huge amount of disease comes from bad sanitation. It is what it is. But in addition, all the toxins that come from industry and nitrates that come from agriculture, all these things are all going into the same pot. We got to fix it. I have to say the early learnings that I got from L. Ron Hubbard really stood me right, because you can't become the effect of your failures. You've got to be, and it's too easy to go, oh my God. The other day I spoke to somebody, he had a great thing going for years, and then, how's it going with your blah, blah? It's not going so great. I'm like, dude, you raised a ton of money. What's up with that? So, and the other thing that keeps me going is the investors. People invest in our business. They need to win, right?
One book that had inspired you in the early days was The Entrepreneur's Dilemma.
Yes.
About innovation coming from within. This is a mindset conversation, right? So how much of mindset makes success?
So Clayton Christensen, of course, was a prophet, an amazing person, and the late Clayton Christensen. And what he said was that the mindset of a company is to do what they're doing, doing it, which is good, right? You want to establish something and keep it rolling. But innovation, as you said, comes from within and is often suppressed by the company. And then literally the innovators leave and create a new company that destroys the old. It's happening right now in automobiles, right? That as Elon Musk said, one day there's going to be 7 Chinese car companies plus Tesla. And the entirety of the Western auto industry, except Tesla, and they'll have a hard time, will just disappear. Whatever you think of Elon, he's a publicity master. Mm-hmm. And so what he does is people like you and me as investors, we're basically visionaries. We fall in love with ideas. It's actually very bad for us because we get involved with bad ideas.
True.
But we go from being an investor to a donor. and that's not a good thing. If you're going to donate, make it a proper charitable organization.
Yeah.
So because you'll get the deduction at least. So what he did, he appealed to that vision and excitement, and then he just kept forging on. And he tells the story of he had some horrible times, but he made it through by constant innovation, and failing early, failing often.
Yeah. I mean, innovation is going to come and disrupt every industry. And, we just had a great conversation the day with an expert on AI, and his, future forecast is, it's going to blow most people's minds. It certainly blew ours in that conversation of what's going to be possible and what's coming in every area, right? From education down. And I love what you said. And I think you make such a strong argument for the importance of marketing. And of course, we're two marketing people, so we're going to get excited about that conversation. But we also know that when in times of financial stress, marketing's the first budget that every business cuts, right? That's the first thing that everybody.
Which is insane.
It makes no sense. History shows that anyone who markets during a downtime is the ones who are successful afterwards. There's evidence of that. And of course, it makes so much sense, your point about the marketing. Even when cash flow is not great, when you're marketing well and you're on a mission and people can see that and connect to that people want to support that, whether that's buying from you as a customer or investing as you as an investor. The importance of that cannot be understated. Like, you have to go out and tell your story and explain why it's important to what you do, your community, the world, whatever the level of impact you're creating, small to large. Telling your story, being the face of your brand. Personal branding is such a key point. But I appreciate what you said so much, because it gives me an optimistic sort of feel for it, which I feel like sometimes isn't always there. People are a little stressed. I think financially people are a little concerned of the future. There's so much talk, so much change. Plus, the US just went through an election cycle. So there's always that uncertainty of what's coming. And, nobody really likes change. But what everything you've said is change is coming. Innovation has to come. And I think more of that is coming. What's your crystal ball view for the next 5-10 years for water and for entrepreneurs? Like, where do you see the future? What does it look like?
Well, you better like change. Let me tell you something. We are changes because AI alone, but there's other factors, is going to dramatically change every job description out there. Last night, I was repurposing some for my wife's school, repurposing some NDA document that she got from somewhere else, and I was search, replace, search, replace, search, replace. I'm like, really? So, I did. It was a big document. It took me 2 hours because whatever. And the AI is just like,
30
so
seconds. Yeah.
give me an NDA that applies to a school and its curriculum.
They could do it now.
And do it now.
ChatGPT could do that for you right now. You could even.
It can do it right. Literally, what's the only thing that's getting in the way is my unwillingness to do the learning curve on ChatGPT. That's the only reason I'm not doing it. But she is now doing AI for, there's now a whole AI structures for schools and teachers and everything. And she's adopting it. She's like, this is great. She used to painfully make word lists from a particular book, word list. Boop. So that's going to be a big change. The second thing is there's a lot of optimism. Post November 5th, I saw a lot of optimism happen in America, and that's good. And a lot of things happening. I do think we're in for a major correction. I don't know. I don't dare say recession. I'm not, but I think that we're going to have some turbulent times economically. I do think it's going to happen. But I think that I'm a big believer in the transformative power of technology. Right? We now own 2 Teslas in the family, which is kind of insane. But the cars are so darn good. You never no maintenance. Just drive them. It's ridiculous. So that kind of change, and of course, soon, within 5 years, we will not have 2 cars. We'll have 1 car just in case, and the other car will be the cyber cab. I'll just sorry, Vicky and Laura, I got to go to blah, blah. Here's my little app. There it is. I jump into it. It goes. That is the future. So now, what the important thing for entrepreneurs is to think about is this is opportunity, right? Dislocation is opportunity. When things change, oh yeah. That's why water is so exciting right now, because one big reason the municipalities are losing ground is they have their own silver tsunami. 7 million jobs became available, and more every day. So retirement's happening at a mad pace. And so private opportunity there's lots of private opportunity um, to create water companies, local water companies, servicing those new abandoned or orphaned businesses. Right, lots of that going on.
I love these conversations. So I love this podcast so much, and having incredibly intelligent people like you, Riggs, who come and bring your wealth and depth of knowledge in deep areas like water and how much that means to you and why. Plus your incredible life history story, which is just amazing. And I think speaks to the power of getting out there in the world and traveling and living in different places. So you have a more expansive worldview. I think that's super important too. And then understanding what you do about failure and quitting and not quitting and what that all means, and learning the lessons. And then, now you're sharing them with others and helping others on their own mission. And I'm talking to everybody listening, like, to go out there and share your experiences, share your light, share your failures and your successes and your lessons, and how you help people. And market your business. For the love of God, please market yourself and your business and your mission, so that other people can jump on board, so that you can get the funding if you need it, and bootstrap, your way to your first 100,000. I think that's actually really good advice. Bootstrap your way to a certain level, and then that's when you leap up from there, because then investors can be like, wow. And if you ever watch Shark Tank, they always are, what have you made so far? They always want to know what you've done to this level to getting on that stage. And they get excited when you can give them some numbers. So, use that sort of as a good starting point whenever if you're at the startup phase. I know a lot of people probably thinking that they need to start a side hustle this year, or maybe they're, worried about redundancies. So they're thinking about what can they do, and maybe they're building a business, or maybe they're like, I've had enough of this corporate life. It's time for something different. We know that there are people all over the world right now with those thoughts, and taking the leap in 2025. And yeah, that's what we love to talk about. That's how we love to help people. And we love people like you who come and bring optimism to this space. You gave me such hope for the future, which is great, because I think a lot of people are feeling a little uncertain. And like I said, we just had a discussion with an AI expert, and it left me a little uncertain, but now I'm feeling a little bit different. So that's why I love these conversations.
Technology is a net. That was a net benefit. We learned that with the Luddites going forward. But I do want to say, I'm going to give you a little scoop, and that is that we're actually this little side company called Takeoff. Well, you're going to hear more about it, because they are in a co-production agreement to do one of these reality shows, and it's going to be called The Raise. It's going to follow companies as money is being raised for them. And the company, the production company is called American Stories Entertainment. Very, very cool people. And they make these shows for, you ever heard of the FAST channel, the free ad-supported streaming television, FAST, which is like Roku and all those weird the interstitial channels. It's actually about a very large audience, and so and the reason I mentioned it, because you said Shark Tank, but there's what happened to Shark Tank. We don't have a lot of these entrepreneurial shows out there today. The point is, The Raise is going to educate people about this, and you've heard it here now. It was the first time I'm discussing it publicly. But boom, drop the mic.
I love it. I'm so excited for that. I think more than ever, with all the innovation and all the technology that's coming, that entrepreneurs need to be on the forefront. They need to be aware and learning and figuring out how to create these businesses, because if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you have that gap filling understanding. Like, you see the gap and you're like, I got something to fill that. And that's what we need more than ever. So this is a perfect time to go out there. And I'm loving anyone who lifts the veil, shows people what it's really like, the good, the bad, the ugly, the crazy, the chaos. Open it up so that you know what you're in for. And hopefully that leads to way more successful, incredible businesses building amazing things in the near future. That's exciting. Thanks for letting us know.
Well, one day I'm going to interview you two on how you got together at both sides of the world.
We're ready for it.
Well, the world needs more Vickies and Lauras, so thank you. Thank you for what you do.